Go to peace.
That's good. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in the rich body of wisdom, which we draw from and which we also add to. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute at this time, we can together recite the blessing for reading together our words from Torah, and our blessing is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. This week we're in Parshat Vayetzei, which is in the book of Genesis. It begins in chapter 28 with verse 10. We'll read through the English translation of our Torah portion, and then we will, I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll have our collaborative conversation about it. So let me share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Book of Genesis, chapter 28, verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream. A stairway was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky, and angels of God were going up and coming down on it. And God was standing beside him. And God said, I am Adonai, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Richard, would you like to read a little bit there?
Yes, Rabbi, thank you. Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is present in this place, and I did not know it. Shaken, he said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He named the site Bethel, but previously the name of the city had been Luz. Jacob then made a vow, saying, If God remains with me, if he protects me on this journey that I am making, and gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safe to my father's house, the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up as a pillar shall be God's abode. And of all that you give me, I will set aside a tithe for you.
Thank you, Richard. And Mark Thompson, would you like to continue there at the very start of chapter 29?
Thank you. Light of foot, Jacob set out for the land of the people of the east. When he reached Aram Naharaim, he looked, and there before his eyes was a well in a field, and 3 flocks were lying there beside it, for the local shepherds watered the flocks from that well. The boulder covering the opening of the well was huge. Every day, when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would together roll the boulder off the opening of the well and water the flocks, and then replace the boulder over the opening of the well. Jacob asked them, My brothers, where are you from? And they replied, We are from Haran. He asked them, Do you know Laban, the grandson of Nahor? And they replied, We know him. He asked them, Is he well? And they replied, He is well, and here is his daughter Rachel approaching with the flocks. He said to them, it is still broad daylight. It is still not yet time to round up the livestock and take them home. If they need to drink, water the flocks and go off and pasture them. They replied, we cannot water the flocks until all the flocks are rounded up and all the shepherds can roll the boulder off the opening of the well together. Only then can we water the animals. He was still speaking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherdess. And when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the flocks of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob stepped forward and rolled the boulder off the opening of the well and watered the flocks of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel. He burst out crying. Jacob told Rachel that he was both her father's relative as well as Rebekah's son. She ran and told her father of Jacob's arrival. When Laban heard the news of the arrival of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to greet them. He embraced them, kissed them, and brought them home. Jacob told Laban of all these events. Laban said to him, you are truly my own flesh and blood. Jacob stayed with him for a month and tended his flocks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. Let me invite Jim. Would you like to continue at verse 15?
When he had stayed with him a month's time, Laban said to Jacob, just because you are a kinsman, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me. Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older one was Leah, and the name of the younger one was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes. Rachel was deeply shapely and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel. Serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, better that I give her to you than that I should give her to an outsider. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is fulfilled, that I may cohabitate with her. And Laban gathered all the people of the place and made a feast. When the evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and he cohabitated. Laban had given his servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her maid. When morning came, there was Leah, so he said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? I was in your service for Rachel. Why did you decide? Laban said, it is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the older. Wait until the bridal week of this one is over, and we will give you that one too, provided you serve me another 7 years. Jacob did so. He waited out the bridal week of the one, and then he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife. Laban had given his maidservant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid, and Jacob cohabitated with Rachel also. Indeed, he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served him another 7 years.
Thank you, Jim. Let me invite Margot. Would you like to read starting at verse 31?
Thank you. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son, named him Reuben, and she declared, it means the Lord has seen my affliction, but it also means now my husband will love me. She conceived again and bore him a son and declared, this is because the Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me this one also. So she named him Simeon. Again, she conceived and bore a son and declared, this time my husband will become attached to me, for I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, he was named Levi. She conceived again and bore a son and declared, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore, she named him Judah. Then she stopped bearing.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Let me invite Dave. Would you like to continue there at the start of chapter 30?
When Rachel saw that she had borne Jacob no children, she became very envious of her sister. And Rachel said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I shall die." Jacob was incensed at Rachel and said, "Can I take the place of God who has denied you fruit of the womb?" She said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Consort with her that she may bear on my knees, and that through her I too may have children." So she gave him her maid Bilhah as a concubine, and Jacob cohabited with her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, "God has vindicated me indeed. God has heeded my plea and given me a son." Therefore she named him Dan. Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, "A faithful contest I waged with my sister. Yes, and I have prevailed." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing children, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as concubine. And when Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son, Leah said, "What luck!" So she named him Gad. When Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, Leah declared, "What fortune," meaning, "Women will deem me fortunate." So she named him Asher.
Thank you, Dave. Let me invite Susan and David, if you'd like to continue there at verse 14.
Yes, thank you. Once at the time of the wheat harvest, Reuben came upon some mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Was it not enough for you to take away my husband, that you would also take my son's mandrakes?" Rachel replied, "Then let him lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came home from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You are to sleep with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." And he lay with her that night. And God heeded Leah, and she conceived and bore him a fifth son.
And Leah said, "God has given me my hire, because I gave my maid to my man," and she named his name Issachar. And Leah became pregnant again and gave birth to a sixth son for Jacob. And Leah said, "God has given me a good gift. This time my man will value me highly, because I've given birth to 6 sons for him." And she called his name Zebulun. And after that she gave birth to a daughter and called her name Dinah. And God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And she said, "God has taken away my humiliation." And she called his name Joseph, saying, "May Yahweh add another son to me."
Thank you so much, both of you. Let me invite Linda and Justin, if you'd like to continue there at verse 25.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away, and I will go to my place and to my land. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I worked for you, and I will go. for you know my work, which I've worked for you. And Laban said to him, if only I have now found favor in your eyes. I've divined, and the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Then he said, specify your wages for me, and I will give them. And he said to him, you know how I've worked for you and how your livestock was with me. For the little that you had before me has increased in multitude, and the Lord blessed you upon my arrival. But now, when I will too provide something, but now when will I too provide something for my household? And he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall give me nothing. If you do this thing for me, I will return. I will pasture your flocks, and I will watch them.
I will pass. I will pass throughout all your flocks today, removing from there every speckled and spotted kid, and every brown lamb among the sheep, and every spotted and speckled one from among the goats, and this will be my wages. And my righteousness will testify for me at a future date, for it will come upon my wages before you. Whatever is not speckled or spotted among the goats, or brown among the sheep, shall be counted as stolen with me. And Laban said, very well, if only it would be as you say.
Would you continue, Justin? Thank you.
And he removed on that day the ringed and spotted male goats, and all the speckled and spotted female goats, whichever had white on it, and all the brown from among the sheep, and he gave them into the hands of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob tended Laban's remaining animals. And Jacob took himself moist rods of trembling poplar and hazelnut and chestnut, and he peeled white streaks upon them, barring the white that was on the rods. And he thrust the rods that he had peeled into the gutters in the watering troughs, where the animals would come to drink opposite the other animals, and they would come into heat when they came to drink. And the flocks came into heat by the rods, and the animals bore ringed, spotted, and striped young. And Jacob separated the sheep, and he turned the faces of the animals toward the ringed ones, and every brown one among Laban's animals, and he made himself flocks by himself, and he did not place them with Laban's animals. And it came to pass that whenever the animals that were bearing their first would come into heat, Jacob would place the rods in the troughs before the eyes of the animals, in order to bring them into heat by means of the rods. But if the animals would delay, he would not place them, so that the ones that delayed were Laban's, and the ones that bore their first became Jacob's. And the man became exceedingly wealthy, and he had prolific animals, and maidservants, and manservants, and camels, and donkeys.
Thank you both so much. Let me invite Catherine. Would you like to read at the start of chapter 31?
Thank you, Rabbi. Now he heard the things that Laban's sons were saying. Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from that which was our father's, he has built up all this wealth. Jacob also saw that Laban's manner toward him was not as it had been in the past. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers where you were born, and I will be with you. Jacob had Rachel and Leah called to the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father's manner toward me is not as it has been in the past, but the God of my father has been with me. As you know, I have served your father with all my might, but your father has cheated me, changing my wages time and again. God, however, would not let him do me harm. If he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks would drop speckled young. And if he said thus, the streaked shall be your wages, then all the flocks would drop streaked young. God has taken away your father's livestock and given it to me. Once at the mating time of the flocks, I had a dream in which I saw that the he-goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, and mottled. And in the dream, an angel of God said to me, Jacob. Here, I answered, and he said, Note well that all the he-goats which are mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, and mottled. For I have noted all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now arise and leave this land and return to your native land.
Oh, Catherine, thank you so much. Jay, are you up for reading a little bit? We're at verse 14.
Yes, Rabbi, thank you. Verse 14. Then Rachel and Leah answered him, saying, Have we still a share in the inheritance of our father's house? Surely he regards us as outsiders now that he has sold us and has used up our purchase price. Truly, all the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, do just as God has told you. Thereupon Jacob put his children and wives on camels, and he drove off all his livestock and all the wealth he had amassed. The livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Padan Aram to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Meanwhile, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household idols. Jacob kept Laban the Aramean in the dark, not telling him that he was fleeing, and fled with all that he had. Soon he was across the Euphrates and heading toward the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So he took his kinsman with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days, catching up with him in the hill country of Gilead. But Hashem appeared to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream by night and said to him, Beware of attempting anything with Jacob, good or bad. Continue.
Please.
Laban overtook Jacob. Jacob had pitched his tent on the height, and Laban with his kinsmen encamped in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What did you mean by keeping me in the dark and carrying off my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee in secrecy and mislead me and not tell me? I would have sent you off with festive music, with timbrel and lyre. You did not even let me kiss my sons and daughters goodbye. It was a foolish thing for you to do. I have it in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father said to me last night, Beware of attempting anything with Yaakov, good or bad. Very well, you had to leave because you were longing for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?
Thank you so much, Jay. Deborah, would you like to read a little bit? We're at verse 31.
Okay, thank you. Jacob answered Laban, saying, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. But anyone with whom you find your gods shall not remain alive. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have of yours and take it. Yaakov, of course, did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Yaakov's tent and Leah's tent and the tents of the two maidservants, but he did not find them. Leaving Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Rachel, meanwhile, had taken the idols and placed them in the camel cushion and sat on them. And Laban rummaged through the tent without finding them. For she said to her father, Let not my lord take it amiss that I cannot rise before you, for the period of women is upon me. Thus he searched, but could not find the household idols. Now Yaakov became incensed and took up his grievance with Laban. Yaakov spoke up and said to Laban, "What is my crime? What is my guilt that you should pursue me? You rummaged through all my things. What have you found of all your household objects? Set it here before my kinsmen and yours, and let them decide between us two. These 20 years I have spent in your service. Your ewes and she-goats never miscarried, nor did I feast on rams from your flock. That which was torn by beasts I never brought to you. I myself made good the loss. You exacted it. Made good the loss. You exacted it of me, whether snatched by day or snatched by night. Often scorching heat ravaged me by day, and frost by night, and sleep fled from my eyes. Of the 20 years that I spent in your household, I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages time and again. Had not the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac, been with me, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God took notice of my plight and the toil of my hands, and God gave judgment last night."
Thank you so much. We're now at verse 43. Then Laban spoke up and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All that you see is mine. Yet what can I do now about my daughters or the children they have borne? Come then, let us make a pact, you and I, that there may be a witness between you and me." Thereupon Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather stones." So they took stones and made a mound, and they partook of a meal there by the mound. Laban named it Yegar Shechadutha, but Jacob named it Gal-ed. And Laban declared, "This mound is a witness between you and me this day." That is why it was named Gal-ed, and it was called Mitzvah, because he said, "May the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of sight of each other. If you ill-treat my daughters or take other wives besides my daughters, though no one else be about, remember God himself will be witness between you and me." And Laban said to Jacob, "Here is this mound, and here the pillar which I have set up between you and me. This mound shall be witness, and this pillar shall be witness, that I am not to cross you past this mound, and that you are not to cross to me past this mound and this pillar with hostile intent. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, their ancestral deities, judge between us." And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Jacob then offered up a sacrifice on the height and invited his kinsmen to partake of the meal. After the meal, they spent the night on the height. Early in the morning, Laban kissed his sons and daughters and bade them goodbye. Then Laban left on his journey homeward. Jacob went on his way, and angels of God encountered him. When he saw them, Jacob said, "This is God's camp." So he named that place Machanaim. And that is our Torah portion for the week. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out. I'd like to go over with you a little bit of a focused study about it. And as I was started to read this week's Torah portion, I immediately became, in a sense, captured by the opening verse and the words that are there in the Hebrew. So our first verse reads in English, "Jacob went out from Beersheba and set out for Haran." As I read it in the Hebrew, I noticed a couple of things. First of all, Jacob went out. In the Hebrew there is Vayetzei, which is why we have the name for this week's Torah portion. Vayetzei, he went out. And that to me resonated because the most momentous event in our Torah reading that we will be doing over the course of our time together, that Exodus from Egypt, that is traditionally known as Yetziat Mitzrayim, the going out of from Mitzrayim. And especially within the Jewish mystical and spiritual tradition, Yetziat Mitzrayim is not just a departure from a physical place. It signifies the endeavor to rise above all that inhibits the soul, whether it's as a result of outside forces or as a result of inner psychological or spiritual limitations that are imposed by our habits and by our own nature.
It's on the website.
So this notion of this Hebrew word having to do with going forth, for me anyway, evoked all that tradition of what it means to go out of something. Then we get in the next significant Hebrew word in that first verse, he went out from Beersheba and sets out for Haran, and there the Hebrew is Vayelech. Well, this notion about going forth is another significant term. This sense of that Hebrew verb is used for about going on a journey of not only discovery of the outside world, but a discovery of oneself. And it's interesting, as I thought about that, I flipped back to last week's Torah portion at the end of it, which we didn't have a time to spend together in studying because of the Thanksgiving holiday. But this is the moment when Jacob leaves his home, and both the narrative itself and the Hebrew that's used to describe the events of his departure create a lot of ambiguity about the circumstances for his departure and his state of mind, if you will, about when he's leaving. Because he's given instructions to leave by two people, his mother and his father. And they give slightly different reasons for his departure, and they use slightly different language. So that's here also on the study sheet. This is what Jacob's mother says to him. "Now, my son, listen to me. Flee at once to Haran until your brother's fury subsides." So she's encouraging Jacob, you've got to go because your brother is so mad at you for having taken the blessing that was presumed to be his as the older brother. And so he's sworn to kill you as soon as your father is dead. And so here is the Hebrew that she uses for this word to flee. She says, Vakum, rise up, get up, barach lacha, which is flee, and then lacha. We've seen that kind of phrase before as when we saw the introduction to Abraham, lech lacha, which we play with as meaning not only go, but either go for your own sake, go for your benefit, or go into yourself, or go for yourself, or go to yourself, something like that. So something here seems to be implied by Jacob's mother's saying, flee lecha, what, flee, what, for your own safety, for your own sake, or perhaps something deeper. On the other hand, the father, Isaac, has his own separate meeting with Jacob in encouraging him to leave, and his mission and his message is a little bit different than his wife's to their son Jacob. He says to Jacob, up, go to Padan Haram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take a wife there. So Isaac is telling Jacob, look, you need to grow up, you need to fulfill yourself, you need to have, you need to go forth and have a future and take a wife. And here in the Hebrew, up, go is kum lech. So again, the notion, the same word that the mother had used, kum, get up, rise up. But here he doesn't use the phrase flee, he just says lech, go. So he seems to be carrying out, Jacob is carrying out as he leaves the home, both the anxiety of the mother, the sense of fleeing, but also the sense of futurity, the sense of fulfillment, the sense of hope that the Father's conveying, which is you're going forth into something brand new, and that brand new is a new life that involves a wife. So this notion about leaving something behind, of departing, of separating, and of going forth into some brand new experience that hasn't totally been mapped out, and which in his own mind, according to what we've just read, is a mixture of both anxiety and hope, of both fear and of looking towards and something, is captured a little bit in this poem by T.S. Eliot. In order to arrive at what you do not know, you must go by a way which is the way of ignorance. In order to possess what you do not possess, you must go by the way of dispossession. So I want to explore a little bit what we've got here between this beautiful ancient text out of Torah and this more contemporary text from T.S. Eliot, connoting that if you're going to become something that you currently are not, if you're going to understand something that you don't currently understand, then you have to dispossess yourself of your own preconceptions. You have to step into the unknown. And sometimes the unknown is not just the objective world. Sometimes the unknown is your own inner self. So I'd like to explore a little bit about what I encountered in this journey that we've just read about. As I read about this notion about the sense of dispossession, of becoming something that you currently are not aware of, I thought of a poem that I had read last year that was written in the 13th century by a Sufi mystic poem, Farid ud-Din Attar, called Conference of the Birds. First of all, the notion of the Conference of the Birds, which we'll talk about the nature of that poem in a moment, is based on a verse that's found both in the Quran, and it's also based on a similar verse that's found in Jewish Midrash. And here is the quote from the Quran. And Solomon was David's heir. He said, "O people, we have been taught the language of birds, and we have been given all things. This is indeed manifest bounty." And from Jewish Midrash, Solomon awoke from what he thought was a dream and realized that he had been taught the language of birds. So here, these two traditions share this notion of this character, Solomon, who in both traditions is understood to be a wise person who has been able to achieve a communion, an attunement with, a dialogue with birds, and beyond birds, animals and nature of all kind. So this is what gives rise to the Sufi poet Attar writing this very long poem called Conference of the Birds, which is essentially this. A group of birds decide that each one of them doesn't know very much. Each one of them has only a particular point of view. And so what they want to do is they want to go seek out this great divine bird who knows all things. So the journey that they go on is quite treacherous, and in fact, only 30 of the birds end up completing the journey. And the journey takes them across 7 valleys. And those 7 valleys are the valleys of quest, love, understanding, detachment, unity, astonishment, and the final valley, deprivation and annihilation. And deprivation and annihilation is not a physical deprivation and annihilation. It's a deprivation and annihilation of the self, of the consciousness of that one is only an individual self with an individual point of view. So after these completing this treacherous journey, they arrive at the destination where this great divinity is supposed to be, and there's no great bird there. All that is there is a lake. And as these 30 birds look down into the lake, they see themselves as a coherent, collaborative unity and realize, what we have been looking for all along was with us. We just had to overcome our own individual egos and our own individual points of view, our own dogmas, and our own individual natures, and cohere together as a unified being. So this is this notion about divesting oneself of one's singularity in order to achieve this swarm intelligence, if you will, compelled me to read this Torah portion this year very differently, because I have been reading the wonderful story in the book of in Genesis about these incredible individual characters. And when I read this year, in conjunction with this poem, The Conference of the Birds, what I saw instead was that the main protagonist in Torah is not Abraham, or Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and Moses, or Miriam, and Aaron, and any of those characters. The primary protagonist is the people Israel. And that all these other characters, if you will, are individual birds who are on their journey. And they represent different stages of development, different unique personalities, different, if you will, archetypes. And the goal is to achieve this coherency, either as a nation or internally a coherency as an individual who's able to overcome one's own ego and one's a narrow dogmatic point of view. So I tremble as I think about the notion that what we're reading here is really something that is a symbolic evocation of a distinction of these individual traits and characteristics, all on a journey to eventually become a swarm, if you will, a swarm intelligence. And I in this week's written commentary, I shared with you a study about neuroscience that was written by 5 Iranian scientists that was published in a National Institute of Health journal just about, I think, 7 years ago. And in it, they try to understand the development, the functioning of the brain, and what the relationship of the brain to the mind's capacity to have consciousness and to seek out meaning. And to do that, they refer back to this 13th century poem, Conference of the Birds, as a way to try to understand the brain functions not because there is a single master function that's controlling everything, but because of the synergistic, cooperative, collaborative neurons that are within the brain working together. And so, to me, it was an insight about what Torah is trying to teach us. Torah is trying to teach us something about becoming integrated within ourselves and the importance of becoming integrated within the world with other creatures as well. And I want to share with you just as a concluding remark, this from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs about hope and optimism. One of the most important distinctions I have learned in the course of reflection on Jewish history is the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the belief that together we can make things better. Optimism is a passive virtue. Hope is an active one. It takes no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to have hope. And with that, I'll just open it up for our collaborative conversation to see what did you see as we journeyed across this week's Torah portion, what provoked you, what interested you, and just your thoughts. So if you raise your hand, I'd love to call upon you. Yeah, okay, we've got Mark, please.
A couple of things struck me as I read my passage, and that was this notion that all of the shepherds were required to work together in order to remove the boulder from the well, and yet Jacob managed to do it on his own. And I guess some of the explanations for that is because of his love for Rachel. He had the power to do this, but after listening to what you had to say about the birds, I kind of made the association between the well and the lake, because the birds gathered together at the lake, and together they were able to swarm and have a cohesion of spirit. Whereas Jacob, he's not mature enough yet, at least at this stage, to understand the importance of consensus as he would have achieved later. He was very much still a loner. And I think that's what the incident at the well, at least to me, represented.
That's lovely. Lovely to connect the incident at the well with this poem, The Conference of the Birds. And I didn't raise the painting that we have on this week's study sheet by Ali Banasada, who was born in Iran. He lived there during the Islamic Revolution, and then during the Iran-Iraq wars, and then eventually he leaves and is able to come to Brooklyn and becomes a painter. But he embraces both the traumatic experience of his early years in Iran, but also carries with him the rich, wonderful tradition of the poetry and the visual arts that is that of Iran and of Persia. And so here he has a painting called Language of the Birds, which is based upon the poem Conference of the Birds. And what he has here is, like much of his work, there is some morphing between something that seems objective and figurative and something that seems subjective and abstract. And sometimes it's hard to tell which is which, but one goes back and forth between these two realms, between the objectively true and the subjectively true. So I just share that with you. So thank you so much, Mark. Lovely that you brought that together with the scene at the well. Let me call upon Jay and then Catherine.
Rabbi, can I pass till after Catherine? I'm trying to come in on iPhone. My iPad is almost out of power. So I should be in your waiting room.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Let me call upon Catherine. And Catherine, if you'll unmute, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so basically I was struck by the mention of stones in this parshat and Jacob's relationship to stones. He uses a stone as a pillow for his head. He pulls back the stone of the well, which opens up the possibility of courting Rachel. And he asks people to assemble stones, which for me is symbolic of making place. He's trying to make a place. He doesn't have a home. I mean, he's been, asked by his parents to leave. It's always seems to be like a temporary status, even though he has children. He doesn't really
think about residing with Laban for the rest of his life. He's still searching for a home. And I sense that his relationships to the stone is kind of like a journey.
Yeah, I love
For
this.
that.
Okay, this is what you got me to think about, Catherine. So I'm grateful. There's something both hopeful about stones, and then there's also something treacherous about stones. Stones as signifying a place of stability, of anchoring. The cave of Machpelah, this is that place of stones where we have a place in the world, and my dead wife will have a place in the world. And this notion of creating these mounds of stones, a temple will be built out of stones, but we also know that there's something treacherous about stones as well. Moses's downfall comes when he hits a stone, and stones also become one of the primary forms of execution, the throwing of stones. So there's something that is about stones that signifies both hope of being grounded and placed in the world, and something that also signifies it also can be your way out of this world. So there's something about that's I find quite enjoyable to think about playing with. So thank you for introducing all that. Let me call upon David and Susan.
This uprising of stones as a inspiration or a theme brought into my consciousness the memory of my second visit to Israel. I was continually discovering second stories about places that I knew about but had not heard those stories about. For example, the Dung Gate, which is near the Wailing Wall in Israel, that has a whole long Islamic legend behind it. And one day, as I was just standing there, not there, but somewhere in Jerusalem, and looking at the ground and seeing these Jerusalem stones, that some people back home had said, "Why don't you bring me some Jerusalem stones?" So I was collecting this baggie of stones, and it just hit me that every one of the stones I picked up, every one of the stones I see has stories, legends, myths. So deserves a book, a short story called Stones.
Well, David, what you reminded me is as a continuation of what Catherine has brought to us, this notion about stones as representing presence. And what I noted down is that the ritual we have of placing a stone at someone's gravesite to signify I was here to remember this person. And David, what you're introducing is that all those stones have been witnesses to so many human events and may carry within their organic material memories of all those events. So there's something very profound that you've introduced here. So thank you for that so much. Let me call upon Richard here.
Yeah, I'll just try to be very brief. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the life of Sarah after she was dead, and talked about, well, maybe at the very end you find out where your path is leading you, and you get stuck along the way, and then things happen and you find where you are. What I'm referring to here is that at the opening of Vayetzei, it says Jacob has had his dream, and it says Jacob resumed his journey. And I found a pencil note that I put up above it years ago. It said, picked up his feet. And that's exactly what he did before he got in bed and died. And if that isn't our home, is back in the earth, that's where we're all headed. And that's not a bad thing. It's a journey to get there. And as Rabbi points out, this is a journey of the mind. It's not a journey about things. It's a journey about hope or about faith, which Moses lost there for a time. And it's that faith that brings us to the place of being in love or whatever, of having love for one another. And I just see this is part of Jacob's journey. What he did during that journey, or what he didn't do during that, or what his personality is all kind of incidental. I see this as a fictional analogy of what it means to get out of the ego and get out of greed and get out of personal desire and move toward a frame of mind that makes you ready to finish your life's area, to get back to God where you came from. Because he picked up his feet, and that's what he does when he gets in his bed to die.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. And let me call upon, I'm going to come back to a couple of those points in a moment. Let me call upon Jay. Would you like to share something with us?
Sure. Can you hear me, Rabbi?
Yes.
Okay. I've been listening to the commentary, and it is correct. The rim, Ivrit itself means crossing. You know, you've crossed over a particular place, or if you're going from one place to another. The leaving can be in the form of an exodus, but they're on the move, and then they settle, and then they're on the move again, and then they stay. So whether or not it's that year back then or it's this year now, that's, again, the allegory to life, and what may arise in you and your family and friends may be very akin to what we're seeing. But I did want to mention that stones are mentioned a lot, because remember, there was a stone, and if I can find my oh, there, yeah, okay. The Hebrew metzivah derives from the stem meaning to make a firm position, natsav. It denotes a single upright slab of stone. Because the stone is by Jacob's head while he sleeps, it not only marks the spot, but also functions as a sort of witness to the dream and the company by promises. Now, there are contractual things made here, and these people are not of the same origins. So oil was used, and remember the word oil. Oil was used in the ancient Near East in international treaty relations and business contracts as a token of peace. Here, the anointing is a symbolic act of dedication that establishes a contractual bond between Jacob and God. And later on, when they're talking about, may the gods here protect this boundary, because you're going to go your way, I'm going to go mine. Reading the there was a God, no matter whose God it was, whether Hashem or whatever, will guard your borders. So may your God protect your border, and our God will protect our border, and they'll meet there, but we're not going to come into each other's. So it's the more you read this, the more you don't have to see what's actually in, you've said it before, you know, you don't have to see what's actually in the calligraphy, but I'm trying, I'll get there.
You're on the journey, Jay. Thank you so much. And I'm going to try and bring some of this together, just to say that as I was reading this week's Torah portion, I have to say I was not merely in the text, I was also in the world. And in the world, I'm just what I see happening in the world right now is such a fracturing that our country seems to be increasingly fracturing, and that fracturing is not just about one side of the political spectrum versus the other side of this political spectrum. It's happening across the spectrum. The spectrum itself seems to be fracturing, if you will. And a lot of it has to do with the extent to which people are becoming so attached to their own particular points of view and their own particular belief systems. And that fracturing is reflected not only in the fabric of our country, it's also being reflected, I think, in what's happening within nature itself. The nature itself is fracturing, which seems to be almost a sympathetic response to what is happening within the human world. And so I return to this notion that what the poem Conference of Birds is trying to teach us is that those who are trapped within their own dogma, those who are hardened to their own beliefs or faiths, are deprived of the journey towards the unfathomable divine, which in the poem Attar calls the great ocean. And what I saw this week really is this Torah portion is opening up for me the fact that these individual characters that we're witnessing are differentiated aspects of the human, and it's all on a march towards achieving a sense of coherency, which as a character Yes, I'm not sure whose feedback there, which in terms of the Jewish Bible takes the form of the character, the Jewish people. That sense of creating the evolution is towards some integrated being, not only a nation, but also internally, a sense of integration where one overcomes one's own individuated sense of existence and is able to see beyond a narrow point of view. So this kind of a journey really cannot be achieved by an individual on their own. It takes a flock. It takes a flock. It takes a swarm to create the kind of intelligence that's needed at this time to heal humanity and to heal nature itself. And hopefully we'll reach the point where, like Solomon, we learn the language of birds. God bless you all. I'm so glad to be on this journey with you. Bless you and look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you, Rabbi.
Be well, everybody. Bye-bye.